Hi, third grade. I have your lesson 117 instructional video here. The lesson 117 goes over rounding whole numbers through hundred millions, and our objective is round whole numbers to the nearest 10,000, 100,000, and millions. And this is probably going to be a very, very short video. In fact, I kind of thought about, should I make a video for this or not? Because it's so much review on stuff you guys already know, because we have been doing rounding all year, and then every once in a while we'll have a lesson pop up and they'll have us rounding to a different place value than we rounded to before. But it's still the same concept. You figure out what place value you are rounding to. You look at the number that's to the right of that place value. You decide, am I going to round up or down? If you're rounding up, your number goes up by 1 and everything after it becomes a 0. If you're rounding down, the number stays the same and everything after it becomes a 0. That's your lesson for today. The only difference is we're going a couple more place values than we have before. We've only gone up to 1 millions. So far, now we're going up to 100 millions, but it's the same as the difference between having it at, going from 100,000s to millions, going from 1,000s to 100,000s. You guys can totally do this. And it even gives you a chart on your worksheet that you can fill in if you get confused. So I think that this is going to be a really easy lesson, which is good, because the next two lessons are going to be very challenging. The next two lessons that we do are going to be dividing by 2-digit divisors when they're not multiples of 10, and then adding and subtracting fractions when they don't have a common denominator. You need to make them have that common denominator. So this is a good time to take a break, have an easy lesson, and then finish strong, because we only have a couple lessons left. All right, so this is what your lesson 117 worksheet looks like. It says review the place value chart. And remember, you can use this place value chart. You can fill in any numbers that are down here on the bottom. If you're not sure which number is in which place value, fill the number in to the place value chart and then look, because it tells you what's in each place value. And actually, this one shows you decimals because we've gone over rounding decimals through thousandths. However, none of the numbers that you're going to need to round today have decimals. So you can kind of ignore those. And anytime you want to plug something into the chart, you're going to be starting with the ones place and then working over. So it says to round numbers through 100 millions, underline the place value that you will be rounding to, which we're familiar with. Ask, is the number to the right 5 or more? So if it's 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, and you add 1 to the underlying number, you're rounding up. If it's 5 or higher. No, if it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, you're going to round down. If you round down, remember, you are not changing the number in the place value that you're rounding to. That number is going to stay the same. And then replace the numbers after the underlying number with a 0. So there's a couple of different examples that we're going to go through. And then you have 7 problems at the bottom for you to round as well. But you guys are going to do so good on this. This is stuff we've been doing all year. The only difference is now, instead of millions, we added 2 more place values. We had 10 millions and 100 millions. So let's say that I have 438,270, and I want to round to the nearest 10,000. So I'm going to underline the 3 because that is in my 10,000s place. Now I'm going to look. I'm not going to look at that 3. I'm going to look at the number immediately to the right of the 3. So I'm looking at the thousands place to see if I'm going to round my 10,000s place up or down. And remember, that rule is 5 or higher, you go up. Lower than 5, you're going to stay the same, and everything else comes after as a 0. So I know right away I'm going to have a 4 because I'm rounding to the 10,000s. So my 100,000s isn't going to change at all, no matter what. Now, I'm looking at that 8, which is higher than 5, so I'm going to go up. My 3 is going to go up to a 4. And then every number afterwards is going to become a 0. So 438,270 is going to be rounded to 440,000. Try a different place value. Let's try $12,876,250. And I'm going to round it to the nearest million because we've rounded to millions before. So I have a 2 in my millions place. I'm going to put my 1 down there right away because any number before that isn't going to change. I'm rounding to the nearest millions. So whatever's in the 10 millions or 100 millions, or even if I went up to billions, that wouldn't be changing. I'm going to look to the next place value over, which is 100,000s. It's an 8. I'm going to think, is that higher or lower than the middle? 5 or higher, it's going to go up. 8 is higher than 5, so my 2 is going to become a 3. And everything after it becomes a 0. So 13 million is what I would round 12,876,252. 427,063,000. And I'm going to round to my nearest 100 million. So I'm going to go all the way over here, my last place value, 100 millions. I'm going to look one place value to the right, and I'm going to think, is that number 5 or higher? No, 2 is lower than 5, so I'm going to round down. But rounding down doesn't mean that this number goes down. It means I'm going to go down. All those numbers past it are going to get pushed down to 0. So my 4 is going to stay the same, but every digit after 4 becomes a 0. So it's going to be 427,063,000 is going to round down to 400 million. We'll try one more. $792,463,051. I'm going to round to my nearest 10 million. So the 9's what I'm rounding, but I'm looking at one place value over. I'm looking at millions. 2 is lower than 5, so this number is going to stay the same, and everything after it would become a 0. But I want to change something and show you something neat. Now, because this is a 9, this could have been different if, let's say, instead of 792 million, it's 795,463,051. I'm still rounding to the nearest 10 million. I'm going to look one place value over to my millions. If it's 5 or higher, I'm going to round up and I add 1 to the place value. If I add 1 to 9, what happens? 9 plus 1 is 10. And I can't fit a 2-digit number in a single-digit spot. So actually, that 1 would go over to my 7, and this would become 800 million. That can only happen if the digit that you are rounding is a 9. Because then if it goes up, it has to give that 1 to the place value over. And if I had had no 7 here, if it had just been 95 million, then it would be 1 with a 0, would be 100 million, would be what I would round that to. If you get confused, you can always punch some numbers into that place value chart at the top, and it'll help you figure out what digit you are looking at. You really have to pay attention because some numbers have 6 digits, but you are looking at the 5th digit to round. You have to really pay attention to reading the instructions for what place value you are looking at. And that's really the hardest part about this lesson.